of victory and the agony of defeat.
Madison, great ball around the corner, Petticini, he beats them all! Junior Polar out wide, bumped away from Trindle, Sharks coming through, none of them can hold this!
Good morning, good afternoon and good evening to wherever you're watching or listening to this episode of the Tip Sheet Podcast. I'm your host John, also known as 4020. Joining me as always is my good mate Craig, also known as Sixties, and with the I suppose benefit or disadvantage of the video format, there is no surprise for our guest today. Bernie, thank you for coming on board for the Tip Sheet as well. We'll get to you very shortly, mate. But I will throw it to Craig first to do our usual how you doing, mate, because I want you to introduce Bernie proper.
Well, John, yeah, doing really well. It's a glorious Sydney day, Tuesday at the moment as we record. And of course, we have to do our usual thank yous and all of the usual let's watch and subscribe, all that sort of stuff. So no matter what platform you're watching this on, if you can give it a like and subscribe, that would be fantastic. Thanks to our sponsors as well, Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta, and of course the home of the Eels, Parramatta Leagues Club. And yes, John, you mentioned it. Every time we look for a little bit more expert advice, we go to the man himself, Bernie Gurr, lifetime in the game, former Roosters and Eels CEO. Bernie, really appreciate you joining us here for our season review today.
G'day, John and Craig. Good to be here, boys.
Yeah, Bernie, it's been an interesting season. We're going to talk about Parramatta, but we're also going to talk a little bit about NRL, get your predictions. We'll also talk a little bit about expansion in the game and get your opinion on that, because there's so much that's going on in rugby league at the moment. But let's start off with the Eels. You've been back in Australia for about a month on this particular visit. Earlier today, you've popped up to the Centre of Excellence at Kellyville. It's the first time you've actually got to tour the completed centre up there. What'd you think?
Look, I thought it was terrific. It was, very, very impressive. I'd heard good things about it. I'd seen a couple of videos on the website about it, and it looked impressive there. But it's even more impressive when you actually get there and see the complete works that they have there. They not only have a wonderful centre of excellence, but they've got a beautiful grandstand, which obviously has a field in front of it where you can play lower tier games such as New South Wales Rugby League, cup matches, junior rep matches, a women's game. Look, it's really an all-in-one facility, which I think is very unique. I don't think you're going to find this type of facility anywhere else in the NRL. Yes, you'll get the shiny buildings with all the shiny toys inside, and this one has all those. There's no question about that. It's large. It's beautifully appointed inside. It's very sophisticated but simple. I think they've done a really good job of recognising the history of the club. They've done a great job of kitting it out. It's very player-friendly, staff-friendly, coach-friendly. The good thing is you can have the men's and the women's all in one space. So I think it's absolutely brilliant. And, they have 5 fields there. And as I said, the grandstand there to play junior rep games. It's got everything there, and it's got, conference rooms and meeting rooms. And there's an ability there to bring in and have a community usage component to it, which I know was one of the fundamental things of teaming up with the Hills Council, was to have that community element to it. Look, I think it's brilliant. So, very, very impressed, and I'm very, very appreciative of Jim Sarantinos for showing me around today up there. Yeah, Jim's done a great job of overviewing the development of that over the last 4 or 5 years. It was just a mound of dirt when I went out there, 6 years ago, and we announced that it was going to happen. But Jim and his team, the board, have done a really, really exceptional job, and it's something that Parramatta fan base and the stakeholders should be very proud of.
I mean, you sort of preempted me here, Bernie, but with the sort of mound of dirt that it was when you were first on board with the development, but it's come a long, long way from training being based at Richie Benno Oval and then Old Sales Yard and having the club offices based in the old Masonic Club. What does having a centre of this sort of magnitude mean for the club as a whole? I mean, you sort of talked about the community aspect there, but is people always like to say that this is like the next big thing for the Eels and this is the big difference maker. How big of a difference maker is it when you talk? Sort of
Look, it's part of the puzzle of setting up a professional sports organisation in the modern day, but it's such a big piece of it because, these things are very, very expensive. You're spending upwards of 50, 60, 70 million dollars to build these facilities, and you've got to have, and there's a lot of red tape. There's federal government, state government, the council, the Parramatta Leagues Club, the Parramatta Eels Football Club. Look, it becomes now the true home of the Parramatta Eels, and it'll serve the club well hopefully for the next 40 or 50 years. So, look, the buildings don't make a football club, but they can certainly add to a football club. At the end of the day, it's about the people. You look at Cronulla at the moment; they have the worst facilities, but they're doing well because they've got great people in their club, and they're doing everything right around that. But Parramatta has the opportunity to do it all. We have what I think is the best week-to-week ground in the NRL with CommBank. I think it's brilliant. The size of 30,000 is perfect, I think, for week-to-week rugby league. It's right in the heart of Parramatta. That's nice. This is out at Kellyville. But what it does is presents the club in a very, very strong light and a very professional light to everybody around the club, all the stakeholders. You can take sponsors there. You can take members and fans there. And particularly, you can take recruits, potential recruits, whether they're junior recruits and their families or senior recruits, and say, this is how we operate. So it adds that element of professionalism. And, it's beautifully set out. There's spaces for everybody. There's a real... people are bouncing in there. They've got a spring in their step.
Yeah.
And it really becomes a home. It'll be the home of Parramatta Eels. I think now they've got the ground. Now they've got the centre of excellence. They've got the junior league facility there, as in, by that I mean the ground and the grandstand, which sits up against the centre of excellence. It really sets them up now. Bottom line is there's no excuses now. Everything's there for the Eels to be successful.
Yeah. Bernie, we just spoke about the centre being in the heart of Parramatta. And I feel silly asking this question, but there are supporters out there who remain critical of the centre being built in Kellyville. Some have actually suggested directly to me and directly to others that we know that it was only built at Kellyville to appease Brad Arthur because he lived up in the Hills District. It is laughable. You were CEO when the development was first announced. Can you clarify the rationale behind the location?
Yeah, look, it came down to the land available. That was one of the factors. We just talked about the 5 fields and the space available. You're not going to get that in Parramatta. Parramatta real estate's too expensive. The Parramatta Council had expressed an interest in having the Eels develop a more permanent base in Parramatta, but it was not advanced from the Parramatta Council side. And even if it was, I did a lot of driving early on when I was at Parramatta around the Parramatta district looking for an area that I think could work. The sale yards, there were some drawings done up for the sale yards, but at the end of the day, when I look at think of those drawings now and compare it to what they have at Kellyville, it's chalk and cheese. So what they have at Kellyville is, you've got a Hills Council that was eager to have the Eels. They want a community element to it, which they're now going to have. The funding piece, federal, state, and also the Hills Council were ready to put in the money immediately. And look, let's face it, that northwestern part of Sydney is, along with the southwestern part of Sydney, two of the fastest growing demographic areas in Australia. It's well within, it is the Eels catchment area or part of the Eels catchment area. So look, in an ideal world, you'd like to plonk it down in the middle of Parramatta, but that's from a realistic point of view, it's just not going to happen.
Just finding that kind of acreage in the
I think we should feel grateful that we got the ground redone at CommBank, right in the heart of Parramatta. So look, the games, which is what the fans are fundamentally interested in, they're played in the heart of Parramatta. The fact that we're 15 minutes up the road for training, I don't think should be a big deal. And so I think all the fans should be so happy that Parramatta has come such a long, long way in the last 8 or 9 years. Some really good work by the board. Jim and his team out there have done a great job of developing this new facility. And it really sets the club up to think where the club's come from in the last 8 to 10 years. It's just amazing. And I couldn't be, even though I'm not involved with the Eels anymore, I still have a keen interest in how they're doing. And I couldn't be happy with where they're at the moment.
Well, let's start talking football then, which I imagine is the real reason people be keen to get your insights on this podcast. Not to dismiss talk about the Kellyville Centre of Excellence, of course, but your astute football commentary has always been a real high point for us. Let's talk Parramatta season. It was always going to be a year of change for the Eels, obviously transitioning under different coaches, a lot of roster changes as well. Did it play out as you expected?
It was probably a little better, actually. And, that may sound strange, but the club's in a rebuild. That's the facts. Rebuilds need patience, and that's not a commodity that's really prevalent among rugby league fans or sports fans in general around the world. They don't want to be patient. They want to look at the scoreboard every Sunday and see that your team's won. And I get that. But the reality was, if you look around the NRL today, there's a lot of clubs that are doing rebuilds or, they're recalibrating what they're doing. So, look, I think they probably, and the way we started the season this year, if you'd have said, well, look, we're going to end up finishing 11th, you could probably say, if you were realistic about the expectations, you could probably say that's not a bad result. Look, going into 2025, anyone that was paying attention would understand that 2025 was going to have its challenges. The NRL is very competitive, and at the end of the day, the Eels finished 11th. They actually came home with a wet sail. They were 13th in attack and 11th in defence. Their attack was a little worse than it was in 2024, but the most important thing was their defence improved. Even though they were 11th, they were 15th last year. The bigger part of that, what's not written in those statistics, is what we've seen over the last 8 to 10 weeks of the season. And, that's been a huge improvement. And look, there's always factors within football clubs as well you can layer over the top, even of a rebuild. We miss Mitchell Moses. When Mitchell only played 13 games this year, he played 8 games last year, so we haven't got a lot of productivity out of our very best player. Mitchell is an outstanding elite player. He's a great young man. He's the leader of the club along with Junior at the moment. So missing him was mammoth. We had the Dylan Brown controversy layered on top of no Moses, rebuilding the club, players leaving, new players coming in, young players being developed. That whole mixture means there was going to be challenges. And I think they quite frankly, they probably did better than I thought. I thought, okay, they ran 12th, 13th, 14th. As long as we're seeing some improvement, that's fine. So I think they probably did a little better than I expected.
Craig's going to ask you about Jason Ryles and the development of the club shortly, but I just want to quickly ask you about Ryles personally. Were you perhaps a little bit struck, because certainly it's been a talking point for me all year, about how aggressively pragmatic he was in his roster reconstruction? There were no attempts to try and have one more crack with an aging roster. Straight away, he made the call to uproot certain players, to prioritise development of young players. Look, new coaches often will try and reshape a roster in their image, but I was really taken by perhaps how singularly unique Ryles was in how forthright he was. Like, he was very, no consideration about trying to have one more crack. Just let's reshape this roster right now, take our lumps this year, and just move on.
Yeah, and I think it was a smart thing to do, and I think it showed the maturity of Jason. He's been around the block as an assistant coach. He's been with Melbourne. He's been with the Roosters. He's worked with Eddie Jones over in England. Excuse me. And I think it showed a real maturity to say, look, I know there's going to be some tough decisions here, and there are players I probably wouldn't mind keeping if I was interested in winning next week. But I need to set the club up so I'm winning at the back end of 2025, and then setting it up for 26 and beyond. So look, I think it was a mature approach. And look, at the end of the day, coaches live and die, so they may as well live and die on their own decisions, not just trying to do short-term decisions that may keep the fan base happy for a few weeks.
It comes back to your concept you opened up with about not having to worry about winning this week or next week, having a little bit of wiggle space or overhead to actually have strategic foresight and planning. So it certainly
absolutely
helps.
Yeah, no, I think he took the exact approach he needed to take. There were some tough calls made, particularly around Gutherson, who has been the heart and soul of the joint for many, many years, 8 or 9 years. Very, very tough call. But in the end, you'd have to say Gutho worked out very well for St George, and on Parramatta's side, Ionga was a revelation at fullback.
Yeah, Bernie, I have to ask this question. In all honesty, after that first round game against the Storm, what were you thinking? like,
Well, it's as much,
even at half time. What were you thinking?
well, Craig, it was as much as what I was thinking before the game. I was talking to my son in the US, and I said, "This has got problems written all over it."
Yeah.
Game one, Storm, mature team, outstanding strike, outstanding spine. Sunny Sunday afternoon in Melbourne. It's a fast track. Melbourne loved to. They smell blood in the water, and they smelled it that day, and they didn't take long to smell it either. So
Yeah.
I was worried from the moment that game was announced that Parramatta would go to Melbourne in game one and play the Storm. And the Storm, they love when they can bully an opponent, and they bullied the Eels early, and that translated to some very, very quick points, and half time was a disaster. So, but even so, you couldn't have got a tougher round one road trip for a new coach on a rebuild who made some major roster decisions. So, look, when it happened, I thought they'd get beat by 30 or 40. I really did. They didn't get beat by 50 or 60, but it didn't throw me as far as saying, oh, well, this is the end of the season. It was more the point was not overly unexpected that they got lapped, but what you were looking forward to was the response, and we know what that was, and it was so positive because you'd come out of the off season with a really positive attitude around the club, and that just doesn't go away in one game.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, not going away in one game is sort of like the contrast point to the back end of a season where the Eels were clearly much better than the first half. During those early rounds, Jason Ryles had a very constant talking point about green shoots, to the point that the media had a lot of fun with it. Were you seeing any change for the better before the results really manifested and started to improve on the field, like in terms of the ladder positions and the wins, obviously? And if so, what was the earliest indication of such development?
Yeah, look, the first 3 weeks were losses. The first 6 to 7 weeks were just really, really tough for the club. And what I admired was that there was no, fans get upset and they're impatient, and that's normal. Media tend to be the same. They dramatise the situation. I wasn't getting any sense of that from coming within the Eels. I was getting a lot of compliments around the traps, and even from you guys, that the systems were being put in place that needed to be done. What I liked was you could see after about 6 to 8 weeks, the effort areas were being a real focus for Parramatta, resetting on defence, chasing kicks, all those little things that they're the boring, ugly things that teams have to do to win, even if the fans don't always notice them. I like that. I like the effort areas. I also like that it seemed to me that he was rewarding players that were doing the effort areas, not just on Sundays, but also during the week at training.
Yeah.
That's what I sensed. I wasn't there, but I sensed it. I also liked, it was by the middle of the year, I thought the attacking and defensive structures improved dramatically, particularly on offense. I thought our attacking structures improved dramatically. Maybe that coincided with Dylan Walker coming in. I think part of it was that. The other part was learning what Jason wanted them to do. And with a bit more confidence coming into the team, you could see their defensive structures improve. And so, and I liked the fact that I could look at certain players each week. Excuse me, guys.
That's okay.
I just have to. I saw improvement in individual players, even little things, Charlie Geimer, Luca Moretti, even Dean Hawkins placing Mitch. Sorry, I'm getting a few phone calls.
That's all right. If you need to take the phone call, you can.
No, good. Dean Hawkins, and even established players. I thought Sean Russell was showing improvement by the middle of the year. So when you see those incremental improvements in players, the incremental improvement in the entire squad. So it really wasn't one thing I saw. I just saw all those little things happening. And, again, they're the small, boring things, but they're the things that went collectively will win your football games and give you the basis to win football games.
Bernie, a hypothetical question, because we've talked about how this back end of the season was so much better than the front end of the season. It would have actually, and I was thinking about looking at statistically how Parramatta measured up in attack and defence in the back end of the season compared to other teams, because across the season itself, we suffered some heavy losses in that earlier part of the season, and certainly defensively, after just 3 or 4 games, we were well and truly at the bottom of the table when it came to defensive prowess. But were the Eels right heading towards the finals? Were the Eels playing the type of football that if they'd have snuck into the finals, that they could have done a little bit of damage?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It's probably not realistic to say that whilst we finish with a flurry, that means we could have beaten the teams in the top 8. If you looked at the teams finishing 5 to 8, there was some quality in there. Sharks, Panthers, Roosters, and in high pressure finals games, I don't think the Eels have evolved yet to the point where they would beat those teams realistically in a semi-final game. No. Do I think they're on the right track to do that? Yeah, I think over time playoffs are different. The intensity is different, and it can impact young players. And we had a number of young players that were growing over the season. But to, for example, put them in a week 1 playoff game against the Panthers, Roosters, or Sharks, pretty big ask to expect us to win that. But that's, of course, the target.
Yes, yeah, and I guess we've seen in the final series thus far, even though we're going to talk about it at the back end of this podcast, but we've seen that there was such a difference in finals football that we've seen the minor premier and the team that was leading the competition for most of the year bow out in successive weeks at the start of the final series.
Yeah, it's finals is a different beast, particularly elimination games.
Yep. Look, it's probably fair to suggest that recruitment was pretty handy this year, Bernie, and a shout out to obviously Jason Ryles and then the recruitment panel, including O'Neill and company in that regard. So rather than just sort of asking you about how they added value or did they add value, how would you qualify or quantify the value added by the new faces, the Parramatta Eels, this year?
I think given the the constraints of the salary cap and the contracts and how you have to work around that in order to go into the marketplace, I think the recruits have done very well. Jack Williams, terrific. Lomax, very good. He was a bit of a mixed bag at times, Lomax. He was very, very good. At times he was a little ordinary. Other times he was good. What I really admire about Lomax, though, is his work rate, his effort, and his toughness. His work rate was phenomenal. So he was good. Addo-Carr was, I think, back to being Josh Addo-Carr, and he added an element to the Eels that we haven't had in a long while. That's just that genuine speed. He was good. Iongi was a revelation at fullback, as we spoke about early. Riley Smith was a surprise. I wasn't aware he was such a good player. And I also liked Kidione Katonga. I thought there was a period of about 3 or 4 games there before he got wounded that I thought this kid's got something.
Yeah, he was really starting to manifest some real potential in the field. And it's funny because he was really polarising for a lot of fans early on because he had his struggles as a young NRL player. But, Craig, we had a chat with Muggo in one of our pre-game shows, and Muggo singled him out as a player that the Eels should be in no way dropping. And this was just prior to the breakout. He said that there is something there with Katonga that I really like and the Eels should persist with. And then lo and behold, he went on that bit of a month-long tear until the syndesmosis injury, the hip drop tackle, sidelined him.
Well, he demonstrated, like in a couple of games there, he demonstrated he's got some very good footy sense because he hit a few holes really well. Now, if you have that instinct to be a hole runner, that's very productive. In a bigger picture, Katonga and Tuolangi are both big, powerful athletes. And in the modern game, the ability to get to those big, powerful athletes out on the edge, your left and right edges, they are extremely useful. You've got Eli Katoa at the Melbourne Storm. You've got Kikau at the Bulldogs. Preston's another big, strong runner on the edge for the Bulldogs. Liam Martin's on the right edge of Penrith. If you can get a lot out of your edges, it adds another attacking element. And those two guys, they're very raw. Yes. Are they out of position defensively? Yes. Have they improved during the year defensively? They have. But they're two big, strong, powerful guys out on the edge. So I would absolutely persevere with them on the edges. You've got Jack Williams that can play an edge, or he can play in the middle, depending on what the team needs for that particular week. So yeah, I'm a big fan of both of those, and they're two guys that, with another off season, some more conditioning, and another season, you won't see the best of either of those two players till 2027. But you've got to persevere with them because they are damaging, and they got points in them.
Well, maybe
the broader issue here, the Eels did very, very well. There's been a lot of criticism public fans over the last few years about the poor recruitment. I think they did really well. And, the Gutho's gone, RCG, Joe O, Bryce Cartwright, Sean Lane, Ryan Madison's in England, Mike Acevo. There were a lot of players that left, but you'd have to say the decisions of Mark O'Neill and Jason Ryles and Benny Rogers, the recruitment people, has been very good. There's it's a turnover, it's a rebuild. And you've rebuilt it with younger players. And I think what we've seen so far, that is absolutely the green shoots that Jason Ryles is talking about.
I really like your shout out to the back rows there too, Bernie, because just as you were talking, I was thinking back to the 2 weeks of the final series that we've seen thus far, and perhaps the two most important positional groups outside of the spine that we've seen in terms of the impacting these key games have been back rowers. Obviously, the game between Cronulla and Canberra was that in particular, but also in a losing team, I thought Preston Campbell was excellent. Preston Campbell. Jacob Preston was excellent for the Bulldogs. And the other group too was the wingers, where I felt they've been key in some matchups as well. So in those tight games when the battles become that much closer, more intense, back row has been a key focal point for the teams progressing through to the big dance, or the games before the big dance now.
Absolutely, and you see some teams have smaller work rate type back rowers, but the good teams, they usually have some strike in the back row. Now with Tuolungi and Katonga, when they get 50, 60, 70 NRL games under their belt, they're going to be dynamite, and they'll also learn their defensive responsibilities better as they go along as well. So they're absolutely worth persevering with. And Jack Williams, he was terrific. Jackson experienced. He's a tough, hard-nosed NRL player. He's got good foot speed. He can do either. So whether you end up with Jack and one of them, or both of them, and Jack's in the middle, or whatever, I think there's something positive there for the Eels.
Bernie, you've just rattled off a whole lot of players that impressed this year. But if you were to narrow it down to one or two players that impressed you the most, be it a new arrival or an established player at the Eels, who would you narrow it down to?
Well, I was really impressed with what Addo Carr did this year. He came off a pretty mentally daunting period at the Bulldogs. He had to re-establish himself. He dropped some weight. I'm getting great feedback of the leadership he's brought to the Eels, particularly his bromance with Sean Russell. They seem to have really hit it off on the left side there. I think he's been terrific for Sean's development. There's the second player I want to talk about. Sean Russell's been a bit maligned by the Eels fans in the last couple of years. But Sean is a big, strong, athletic young man. I think he's got ability. I've watched him all the way from the junior reps. Always had great ability and can kick goals. I think Sean really took the next step this year to being a legitimate NRL player. He did it very quietly, and I think Addo Carr helped him immensely. So I think he was terrific. Iongi was a standout in many ways. And what I admire about Iongi, look, everyone sees the brilliant runs and the great catches, but he's very brave. There's very few sets where we're coming off our own line where he doesn't say, give me a run. And he's not afraid of contact. He is a tough young fella. So I think Iongi was brilliant. And Riley Smith, because Riley Smith, to me, I wasn't aware of him, but he's a tough, fearless, gritty competitor. He's really someone that I'm sure Jason Ryles looks at and says, you'll be playing, because you're just tough and gritty and competitive, and he asks no quarter and he gives no quarter. So I thought he was terrific. Now, having said that, just as an aside, I think the Eels with Talon De Silva have that number 9 spot very well covered from a skill and contribution point of view. I like Smith and De Silva together.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that to me, Bernie, because you and I, in our conversations in the past, you mentioned Talon De Silva as someone that you admired and hoped that the Eels would pursue.
Exactly, I did tell you that.
Yes, and I think we've seen evidence in at least one game this year where Jason had both Riley and Talon on the field together. With you don't want to lose that absolute terrier-like chasing that Riley Smith brings, where it's just constant pressure on the kickers, just there cleaning up all the scraps. And then when Talon comes on, and he brings that little bit of guile, that's something different in that dummy half role, and maybe we're talking about that little bit of individuality. Riley's very much that team focused. I'm not saying that Talon's not, but he maybe sees things in a different perspective.
Yeah, Talon's shown in his junior rep career, he's got a little bit of Benny Elias in him. I'm not saying he's in Benny Elias's class by any means. Benny Elias was one of the greats. But what I'm saying is that, to your point, he's got really good skill levels. I think he's got a very good sense of the game. I think an off-season at the Eels will do him the world of good. When you don't have an off-season and come in, it's very, very difficult to slot in. I think he needs to work on his concentration. He's got a beautiful pass, but he doesn't always. He can miss the odd one, but he's got a beautiful spiral passing both sides. I think he can run the ball. So I think, look, there's a lot of upside to Talon De Silva. I'd be very excited to see Talon play next year after he has a full off season under Jason Ryles and Mitch.
Yeah, and I'll throw in Nathan Brown there as well.
Yeah, another solid dummy half historically. Yep.
Watching the work that Nathan Brown did with Riley and the other dummy halves this year, it makes you appreciate the value of someone who's been there, done that at the elite level themselves.
Not many young rakes get the call on the likes of Nathan Brown and Josh Hodgson internally for reference points when it comes to sharpening up their games. And look, not a big social media guy for me, Bernie, but I have been passed on some very humorous sort of messaging from Talon where he owns up to getting roasted by Mitchell Moses, and for me that's a big positive. Instead of turning like a real getting burnt on that national TV moment into something negative, he's owning it and turning it into a positive reinforcement thing, which is great. So good on him.
Yeah, I saw Mitchell engaging with Talon in the last few games. They're fine, mate. People overplay
the field. Exactly.
It's football clubs that honestly.
Players
argue all the time.
Yeah, we had a long discussion about this on
arguing games. It's just the most overblown thing of all time. So no, I think he'll be good, and I think it'll just give him an off season. He'll develop his game tactically. He'll develop it skill wise. He'll develop it physically. He's still young. He's still got to develop physically as well. So I think Talon's going to be a real positive for the.
Now we touched on it already, Bernie, but we started the season ice cold, finished like a house on fire. Between those two polar opposites, what would be your highlight of the season? Is it individual? Is it team-based performance? What stands out to you the most?
I think the highlight for me is the team's developing its identity. It's an identity that mirrors the coach. He wants hard work. He wants an ethos of hard work. He wants them to be gritty. He wants them to be tough, play for the 80 minutes and compete and see where the cards fall. I like that. At the end of the day, the good teams these days, historically in the last 10 to 15 years, particularly the Storm and the Panthers, that's what they do. A lot of what they do all the boring things well. They do all the effort areas well. And it all comes from what they do on the training track and their mental attitude in the game. That's why teams that don't do it, they fade in and out of games. You hear coaches often say, oh, yeah, we can play for 60 minutes, but we haven't put an 80-minute performance together yet. Well, Penrith and the Storm have more 80-minute performances than any other club. Why? Because of their work ethos, their mental attitude, their accountability to individual performance, which manifests into team performance. I really like that. I like the development of the younger players. I like the sense, and I'm not in the building anymore, but the sense of spirit and camaraderie and even enjoyment I could sense in the back half of the year. And even talking to a couple of the players up there this morning, there's a real buzz in the joint, and just that enjoyment of loving their football. And when you're not a chance of making the playoffs, that's very easy to let that slide by and you just fade out of the season. And we've all seen teams that have done that. I'm not going to name them, but we've seen them even this year where they're not making the 8 and they're just sort of going through the motions. The Eels were not that team, and probably the highlight of that was when they beat the Roosters at Combank. The Roosters had everything to play for. They tried really hard. Yeah, they lost their halfback, but the Eels were just the better team that night. Why? Because they were hungrier. They were gritty. And with Mitchell's kicking and his class, they got home. But there's also, a bigger picture, a macro sense that the club's back on track with its footy program. Over time, sometimes coaches have to leave and new coaches come in. We all acknowledge particularly, man, I know you guys too, the great job that Brad Arthur did for the, during very tough, dark times. And I was there for 3 years of that, where you're trying to recalibrate a football club. So Brad did a great job. But I'm sensing now there's a real one club mentality in the club, and I think that the new facility absolutely helps that. And we've got a united footy club. Footy and admin are united.
Well, let's talk about the coaching. And it might be a tough question to ask you, given that you're not in the building anymore and you're on the outside, not just on the outside, but you're from a distance now, Bernie. But can we get your impression about what Jason Ryles and the coaching staff have brought to the club?
Yeah, I think sometimes, footy clubs evolve, organisations evolve. Sometimes you have to, renew yourself, rebuild, renew, whatever you want to call it. And that's what the Eels have done with Ryles and his assistants, Nathan Brown, Sam Moore and Scott Wisemantle. And they've brought so much to the football club. It's, whether it's better or not than the prior will be seen over time. But it's different. There's a lot of commonalities too in good football teams. I think they brought the hard work ethos we talked about. I think tactically, I really like what I was seeing tactically in the last 6 to 7 weeks. We were moving the ball, but doing it in a very controlled manner, which meant we could still keep our completions up. It puts questions to the defence. We were moving the defence around. Dylan Walker, particularly in the middle of the field, between the 30-yard lines in the middle of the field, he was terrific. I thought Junior Barlow had a very good year. So what's that mean from a coaching? The coaches also provided, I think, a sense of unity. You could feel the players felt they were learning and developing. The skills were good. I know Nathan Brown's big on skills. I like our dummy half work was, for the main, very, very good. Smith, particularly, and De Silva, their passing from dummy half, it reminded me of Reed Marnie when he was with us, because Reed's strength was his dummy half passing. He could spiral at 20 metres either way straight off the deck. That's clean. It gives your offense a clean start when your dummy half's operating effectively. So there's skills-based work they did, and also I think there was a recognition by the coaching staff that they needed a bit more speed. And with Iongi and Adokar, the team looked faster. So that's all important. The other thing Jason has done, from my understanding of talking to a few people, he's really bought into the one club philosophy and mentality. So the people within the club speak very highly how the club feels very engaged in one club, which used to be very difficult when I was there, because we were operating out of 2 different venues. The admin was out of George Street and the football club was out of the Sale Yards. It's so difficult to get that one club mentality with that, but apparently they've got it, and it's been driven by the head coach. So he's done I think in year 1, he gets a huge tick, a huge pass. He's done a great job. Yeah,
the design of the Centre of Excellence, where you've got that commons dining area, kitchen that's there, but then of course you've also got the cafe that's outside, and you see the staff mix. Well, we see this. We're not going into the inner sanctum whenever we're up there, but if you're out there in the cafe and you see the players mixing, you see the staff that are out there as well. So I would imagine that even back then, when you were there at George Street, Bernie, there'd probably be staff and players that would never have met or seen.
Oh, we had to. You have to intentionally have a few functions and get-togethers to make it happen. It's very difficult. It's extremely difficult. What they've got now with the new Centre of Excellence, it fixes that problem immediately, and it makes everybody feel like it is a one club organisation.
Now, Bernie, I imagine if we'd opened up the polling on questions to our listeners, this would be one of the most popular ones, because this is a topic that we always get sort of broached on every week of our live streams. But let's look at the roster as it stands going into next season. Firstly, what do you see as the strengths of Parramatta's roster heading into next year? But also, what positions require selective recruitment? And we've sort of talking about the need to not just go out and get a player, but go get a plus player at this point to help raise the squad's not just floor but ceiling. But what positions would you say it's like to recruit to take the club to the next level in 2026?
Well, when you're looking at the roster, you start with the spine. And so you look at the spine, I think we're dummy half with Smith and De Silva, as we've talked about. I think we're very strong there. I like that. Clearly with Moses, Mitchell is now gone into the elite class of player. He's probably in the top 4 or 5 players in the NRL, quite frankly. And he's demonstrated that at state of origin level and just Parramatta. I think Iongi at fullback, as we've spoken about, he's our fullback, and he's only going to get better too, because we see he's got speed, we see he's got courage, but I think he's going to get tactically better. You'll see him roving around the field, in the middle of the field, a la Tedesco. You'll see him get better on the edge of good ball shaped, where he needs to come in as the extra man and shift the ball quickly to either a centre or winger. He'll get better at that even. So I think those three are covered. 5'8" is a position that we haven't nailed down yet. I think Joash Papali'i looks like he's got terrific athletic and skill capabilities. Still not sure whether I haven't seen enough of him yet to decide whether he's going to be our long-term 6 or not. Mm-hmm. It's such a critical position. So I'm not sure yet whether he's the answer. We've seen a lot of players that can dominate at reserve grade level, but when they come up to first grade level, they don't quite produce. I'm not saying he's in that boat yet, because I don't think there's a body of work.
Cautionary tale here before you see the results.
We haven't given him the chance to present a body of work where we could make a fair and valid assessment of whether he's the man on a longer term basis. I hope he is, because he's certainly elusive and a good athlete. So I'd say 5'8" is still probably a question mark going forward. I think we need one more middle forward. And look, the team we got now is not a top 4 team. Let's be blunt, they're not. Therefore, that's the conversation we're having now. What do we need to add to become a top 4 team? You could potentially look at an edge. Now, if you view Williams as a middle, you need another edge. If you view Williams as an edge forward, you might need another middle. And because there's limited funds, you can't buy everybody. So I think you need to just make that decision. In the middle, we've got, Barlow, Hopgood, Tuivasa, Dury, Moretti, Geimer. We're building a nice base there of players to play in the middle. We may need one more, which means if you move Williams in there, you need an edge rower, or you say no, I need Jack Williams as one of my back row rotation with Tuolangi and Katonga, and therefore I need to go and get another middle. The other thing we really need, and I would put this right there as important with the 5'8" issue, maybe even more important, it could be the number one. We need a strike centre. That's my thoughts. I think Penasini and Russell are really solid players. I'm a fan of both. But I'd love to see, and I'm just being totally honest, I'd love to see someone with genuine speed who is a game breaker. I think there's a position requirement that we might need a strike centre. What is good is that these young players will develop. The thing is, though, the key for the Eels is to get the next 2 to 3 external recruits right. Every good club, whether it's Melbourne, who go and get, Eli Katara a couple of years ago, or Stefano Atoikamanu, or Sean Bloor, they go out and grab periodically players from other clubs that they can fit and help them go to the next level. The Bulldogs have done it. Even the Panthers, they pinch Blaze Talangi off the Eels. They pinched Papali'i from the Tigers. You have to make sure those 2 or 3 external recruits that improve your football team over and above all the development you're doing below. The Eels have to get the next 2 or 3 external recruits right, and that takes you from 7th to 3rd. That's how important that piece of the puzzle is.
Yep. Well, just looking at this now from another perspective, the Eels identify as a development club. And in 2025, the Eels appointed the majority of their lower grade and pathways coaches on a full-time basis. And in the last pre-season, those coaches were working with the NRL squad during the pre-season, working with the full-time coaches as the NRL coaches. What would be the greatest benefit for that level of investment, Bernie? Is it in the way they're able to then prepare their own teams? Is it the club culture, that total club vision and philosophy? Is it the professional development of those lower grade coaches? Is it all of the above?
It's all of the above. And even sitting above that at a macro level, it demonstrates to all your stakeholders. You can say you're a development club, but once you start employing these people full time and you can You can explain this to all your stakeholders. Oh, by the way, we're not just saying it, we're actually doing it, we're living it. So the fans, members, sponsors, even your own staff internally and the players in the top 30, if they know that your junior rep programs have full-time coaches who are liaising with the NRL coaches, everybody around and in the club knows they're not just, talking the talk, they're walking the walk. They're making that financial commitment to do it. So that is very important. And secondly, all those other things you said, Craig, are exactly right. It's the consistency of coaching philosophy. And I think Penrith have been a very good example of that. When they bring a player up from the New South Wales Cup or the Jersey Flegg, they all just seem to slot in automatically. It doesn't. They know the systems, they know the approach, they know the expectations. So, yeah, I think Parramatta are absolutely have done. I think Jim and Mark and the team out there have done a great job of getting that structure and system in place, whereby these coaches are given the resources to do their job full time. And, when they're not working with the younger players, they're working with the senior players, watching senior training, working with the senior coaches and taking that philosophy back to the young guys. It's the attacking shapes, it's the defensive philosophy, it's the expectations around effort areas. All those things now permeate from Mitchell Moses all the way down to your hands. These are the expectations in our club. These are the fundamental things we do on attack and defence. Here are the important things that make you a good footballer. Here's what will give you a chance to be an NRL. And it's a long road, but the more organised you can have that, the more systematic you can have that, the greater chance you have of getting those players, more of those players generate through and become players. And I think the Eels are very much on the right track on the development side, and they're dedicating to the resources to show that it can work. And look, you're not going to keep every one of these players we're developing now in our 17s, 18s, and 17s and 19s and 15s. They're not all going to end up playing for the Eels. It just doesn't. Quite frankly, the better you do it, the more likelihood you're going to lose the odd one to another club. Like, a lot of people pinch Eels players, young players, and a lot of people pinch Panthers young players. And a lot of people pinch players out of the MacArthur from the West Tigers because they're generating these good players. Yeah. But if you can keep the bulk of your young players, you won't keep them all. Like Blaze Talangi, we lost him. Parramatta didn't want to lose him. But if you can keep the bulk of the young players that come through your development system that you want to keep and you think can gravitate to the NRL level, then that's why you're doing this wonderful development work.
Well said, mate. Now, Bernie, first Ashes tour in, 22 years? 03, I think, was the last one. Look, Eels got a couple of contenders for getting on that plane over to the motherland in England. Among them would be Mitchell Moses and Zach Lomax for that upcoming tour. I know that Josh Adokars put his hands up and asked for Kevin Walters' number on the Matty John show. I think it was in the post-game of the final round at Bank West, or CommBank. I always get that one mixed up there. Who do you think is in the mix, the Bull and Gold? Is it those three? Is there anyone else that could be a smoky?
Well, I had to think about that. I don't think so. I think you've got the three. Mitch, I think if Mitchell doesn't go, it's wrong. He needs to go, and I think it's a 24, 25-man squad roughly that they're taking. I think they'll take clearly they'll take Nathan Cleary and Cam Munster, and I think they'll take Dearden and Mitch, knowing that Mitch can cover half and 5'8", knowing that Dearden can cover half and 5'8", and knowing Dearden can probably cover hooker if he needed to. Yep. I think those four you're gonna have the half 5'8" covered beautifully. So I think they'll go. I think Lomax will go. I think he's earned enough. He's done his job well enough to deserve a spot. I would love Adokar to go. I think it'd be a great reward for him. And in the last month, sure, there was the wingers scoring better tries as far as catching aerial kicks, but I would make the case of running in tries. There was no one better than Adokar in the last 4 to 6 weeks. He was running in tries that actually some of those other guys that were leaping, they couldn't score the tries that he was scoring. So I'm a huge fan of Adokar. If he went, I think he'd be well-deserved.
And I think he'd certainly add to the camaraderie and spirit of a touring group.
Oh, yeah, they'd enjoy his company, mate, yes.
Bernie, we'll wrap up the Parramatta specifics and just by asking you, what should be our expectations for 2026?
Well, everybody wants to start the year with the hope they can win the comp. Realistically, if I look at it, if you look at the top 8 teams today, they're very, very strong clubs, and none of them, you look at them and say, well, I don't think any of them are going to be worse next year. I don't see any of them being worse, and some particular, maybe even Canterbury, they may be better next year. But I think if the Eels could finish 5 to 8 next year in the back half of the 8, you'd probably take that. Now, that doesn't mean if they had a fantastic run with non-injury that they could go even a little higher, but I think, let's be realistic here. If they could finish in the bottom half of the top 8, that coming from 11th, that would be the next stage in the development. Canberra came from outside the top 8 to win the minor premiership. That's very, very rare. That's not going to happen that often. And I certainly
a lot of stuff aligned for Canberra this year in terms of, I think, a lot of their mid-tier players stepping up and finding a new level, and obviously players like Ethan Strange becoming genuine stars. But
yeah, exactly. I don't see that happening on a regular basis. So if Parramatta could finish 5th to 8th next year, I think Parramatta fans should be very pleased with it. But the target has to be playoffs.
Agreed. Yep. I think it's super important to get a slice of finals football next year for the blue and gold.
But you're asking for a bit of realism and patience with the fans. So,
well, like Craig said, that puts a lid on the blue and gold focused discussion. So let's head into the wider NRL. And look, a lot's been made of this year, and I think there's been a lot of sort of chest beating about the big numbers. I think Buzz Rothfield was on 360 this week, talking about how great the finals were in terms of both TV and attendance performance, and the season across the board has been ultra competitive. What do you make of what we've seen on the field this year from round 1 right through to the final, or week 2 of the finals where we are right now?
I've watched a lot of games this year sitting at home in California, and I think it's been a brilliant season. I really do. It's been a very, very even season as well. When administrators sit down and run a professional sporting competition, ideally they'd like every team to win and lose the same number of games. Then you've got an equality across competition. Now that's never going to happen, but that would be a pure objective. The Storm and Panthers, I felt, came back to the field a little this year. I don't think, outside of last Sunday where the Panthers looked like they're back to what they were, they haven't been that this year. The fact they're running last at one stage is demonstrative. Now, I don't think the Storm have been as dominant, quite frankly, as some of the media think they have. I don't see during the year where, they could eke out wins on their work ethic, but they weren't the dominant team that I've seen in the last 8 to 10 years. They just, in my opinion, just from a pure football perspective. So I think in many ways the Storm have been a little overrated. So there's been no great team through the season outside of the first 40 minutes last week by the Panthers against the Dogs. That was the best 40 minutes I've seen in the year. But it's been a great season because the games are so even. St George lost a number of games by less than 6 points. You give them 3 or 4 more wins and they're knocking on the 8. They haven't done that, so now everybody thinks they've had a terrible season.
How much perception can change, eh? Yes.
Absolutely. The Raiders surged with their young stars, and that was great to see, Weeks and Strange and Savage and Tomoko and these guys. It was a great season for the Raiders, but I think it's been all in all a brilliant season, and that's manifested itself in the TV viewership numbers. I think, and the membership numbers of each club, they've been brilliant.
Bernie, just moving to the finals, because we're touching on this now, were you surprised by the early exits of the Bulldogs and the Raiders?
Yes, I was, because you've now got 2 top 4 teams that are out. Everybody says you can't win it unless you're in the top 4. So I did not expect the Raiders to lose 2 playoff games at home in consecutive weeks. I did not expect that. I thought they'd win one of those. And the Bulldogs, the Bulldogs were very close to beating the Storm in Melbourne. They got that last intercept that wrapped up the game. But if he misses that and it sticks, the Bulldogs score and win. And then maybe they were deflated. I know Crichton was out. He was a huge out for that game. And then, so Crichton was out of the Bulldogs, and then you come over here and the Panthers played the perfect 40 minutes. I don't think there was many Eels fans upset with the Bulldogs' demise. But, they were very close. So I did not expect both of them to go out in straight sets. No, I didn't. So again, that just shows the evenness of the competition and also the strength of teams in the bottom four of the top 8 this year.
I'm not one to leap to the Raiders' defence, Bernie, but I will say that week 1 final was perhaps the most emotionally draining game I would have ever been a neutral party to watch, let alone be barracking your home team for, thinking they've won the game twice and haven't correctly taken away. There weren't bad calls, and to have it then taken out by that field goal from Ben Hunt. You can understand why they were perhaps on the fritz.
Yeah, and then they lost Ethan Strange.
Big loss. Outstanding young player, Ethan Strange.
The apple cart, even though his replacement played reasonably well, he wasn't Ethan Strange.
Yes.
And I think that hurt them. I think, that game they played against the Broncos, at 28-12, they should have iced that game.
Yeah.
There's no question they should have iced it, and they didn't. And they paid the price.
We talk about the importance of Eels playing finals football next year. It's for those sort of experiences to learn how to close those games out when it's
Absolutely.
So tight. Yeah. All right, I've got a couple of quick.
I can guarantee you, if Penrith are in that situation, Cleary closes that game out.
No doubt. I've got a couple of quick hitters for you before we move to a different topic again. We do have a couple of rounds left of the final series. Who wins this week in the grand final qualifiers or the preliminary finals, and then who takes out the overall gong, the big dance?
Well, the Sharks Storm game in Melbourne is a really, really interesting game.
It's 2 grand final rematches, isn't it? 2016 there between the Storm and the Sharks, and then we got Brisbane and Brisbane.
2023.
Yeah, yes, Brisbane. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but you're 100% right. I think they're both fascinating games. I think they're great matchups. I think all teams, they're comfortable that they've justified their position in the 2 prelim finals.
Very much so.
I like the Sharks to beat the Storm. I haven't been a fan of the Storm for about 10 weeks. I just don't think they were clicking. They don't seem to be able to get their spine, which you could argue they have the best spine in the NRL. Grant, Hughes, Pappenhausen, and Munster.
Yeah.
They don't seem to get on the field enough together to generate their combinations. They haven't looked they've looked an 8 out of 10 Storm, but not the old 9.5 out of 10 Storm. To me, that's just my observation. I'm a big fan of Craig Fitzgibbon. I think the team is starting to be symbolic of their coach. Tough, gritty, hard work. That's what they're doing. At periods in the last 2 weeks, they've looked gone. The Roosters were dominating them physically for long periods of the game, as were the Raiders, but they stuck tough. They were very resilient. I think they like their chances against the Storm in Melbourne. Melbourne could come out and just have a Melbourne night where the passes stick and they can blow teams out. But I don't see it. I think the Sharks will upset the Storm. Broncos Panthers will be fascinating. Fast, dry track up there. This has got explosive game written all over it. I think the Panthers. I think their pressure football game. They'll strangle their opponents. I think Talangi and McLean on their left side are improving by the week. I think they're both terrific young players. And, of course, they've got the old firm. They've got Cleary, the maestro. They've got Edwards, To'o, Alamotti, Tungo, Yo, Martin, Sorensen, Kenny. They've got these guys. They've done it before. They know how to win. If it's 6-6 after 20 minutes, they'll be sitting back thinking, we got these blokes. We're going to just strangle them to death. They won't live with us for 80 minutes. Now, the Broncos could come out and explode and, lead 12-0. I just think the Panthers, in this ruthless, relentless style of play that they have, and with Nathan Cleary, kicking to corners, and just his selection of play, run, pass, kick, where to kick, etc., is just exceptional. I think the Panthers will get the money, but I think the Broncos will be extremely entertaining. One thing about the Broncos, they don't get enough out of their edge. Remember we were talking about edge back rowers before? For all the so-called explosiveness of the Broncos, they don't get enough out of their edge back rowers, attacking-wise. If it's not Castoni Staggs, there's not much happening out there. The 2 edge back rowers, Jordan Ricky and Piakura. Piakura is deadly in defence. He's a hitman. But they just don't get enough attacking firepower off their edge back rowers. They rely on Staggs and then Walsh wrapping around and doing his thing.
Yep. And
again,
the
importance of edge back rowers to your offense is really important. Like Liam Martin at Penrith, he's a great hole runner.
Every final series, Liam, and State of Origin too, Liam Martin's value just gets shown time and time again.
He's a big match player, Liam Martin.
Yep.
So I think, look, I think Sharks is my upset tip, and Panthers is probably the tip most people are going to go with. But I'm really hoping the Broncos can turn on some fireworks and Penrith has to respond, because I think that'll be a fascinating game up there. But I got to back Cleary.
I respect the call. It could be an absolute barn burner up there at Suncorp, but
I think it'll be sensational.
Yeah,
and then Bernie, if you project it through one more week, who takes the title?
Yeah, between the Panthers and the Sharks in this case, I guess.
I think. Well, wouldn't that be ironic? You'd have two teams outside the top four in the grand final.
First time ever. Yeah.
First time ever. Look, I think if they go that far, often the reason why people say you can't win outside the top four is because you have to win 4 weeks in a row against the very best teams, because that's who you're playing in the playoffs. So it's 4 weeks of intense football, 80 minutes against the very best teams, not the worst teams. That's why teams historically can't do it. The one team would have the confidence and the inner mentality to do it would be the Penrith Panthers. And only because, not that the Sharks don't have the talent, I just think if they beat Melbourne in Melbourne, they would have beaten in consecutive weeks the Bulldogs, the Roosters, the Raiders, and the Storm. I think there might be a bit of juice squeezed out of the orange there. They might have any juice left, and I'd have to tip the Panthers. But it's going to be a fascinating couple of weeks. And, the NRL's very fortunate. They've got a great end of the season.
I like that.
Bernie, I want to know what have Penrith got in the water up there that this time every year they seem to have almost no injuries when it comes to finals football.
Yeah,
that's a great point. They're fully healthy. They're probably one of the few teams that are fully healthy. And I don't know I think there's a fair bit of luck in it, Craig, to be quite honest with you, because, when you break bones, that's luck. It's bad luck. When you strain, if you're having continual straining, if you've got 5 hamstrings, preparation of what you're doing, but their physical preparation is really good. More importantly for them, they are mentally the toughest team in the NRL.
No doubt.
A lot of teams hope to win. They know they're going to win. There's a big difference between knowing and hoping. Hope's not a strategy. And Penrith have the mentality now. They have the mentality of demonstrated ability. They've demonstrated over a period of time that in big, high-pressure games, they think they're going to win. They know they're going to win. They've won 14 in a row. They won 4 comps in a row. They won 14 playoff games in a row. So a lot of it is in the mentality. That's why whoever beats them, they're going to have to come with their very best mentality on the day, because Penrith are.
I mean, we learned that lesson in 22. So we got your projections on what Parramatta will look like next year, Bernie. We saw the Canberra Raiders come from the clouds this year. Which clubs will be the big improvers in 2026 across the NRL?
Well, the club I think will definitely improve is the Dolphins. I tipped the Dolphins this year to finish 8th. And
barely
they finished 9th. And they were missing Herbie Farnworth, Tom Flegler, Tom Gilbert, Jack Bostock, Max Plath, and Daniel Saifidi. I think the effort of Christian Wolf to get that team to 9th.
Fantastic.
And some of the football they played during the year, exquisite.
Yeah.
They scored some of the best tries. They put on some of the best periods of attacking football you've seen all year. I think Katoa, their halfback, is a superstar. I heard him interviewed last night, on
Matty Johns,
on 100% Footy, actually.
I was 100% Footy, sorry, Matty Johns was the night before, then he was on a bit of a meeting.
And he was absolutely brilliant. For a 21-year-old, he has the maturity. And when I watch him play, he's like a little mini Nathan Cleary. So, look, I think if they stay healthy, they're a lock for the 8. That's my opinion. Now, one good team's got to drop out, and then the Eels have got to go in. So
it's
you're really dropping 2 out.
No, it's going to be a great battle.
Now, here's a funny one. I think if the Dragons can stay healthy, I think they can improve. Only because they've got an inventory of good young forwards that very few clubs have. Dylan Egan, Toby Couchman, Ryan Couchman, Hamish Stewart, Jacob Halagahu, Pacifica Tonga. They've got a stream of young guys that if it's not next year, it'll be the year after. Their problem at the Dragons is their spine. Gutho's still very good. Their 6 and 7 are not great. They're okay, but they're not great. I think it's King Tonga and Flanagan. They lose a lot there versus the very best teams. And I still like Cook at 9. Cook's still a very, very good 9, but they lose a bit in their spine. But they've got a lot of good young forwards coming through. And if Flanagan can harness them and keep them healthy, they will improve. Probably not enough to make the 8, but if they get those young forwards healthy, but they really need a playmaker. Flanagan actually played his better football earlier this year when he was playing at number 6. And I thought he played quite well. I thought he was unfairly criticised. I don't think he's a 7. I think he's a 6. They need a 7 badly, but then again, a number of clubs need a 7.
The great
now, here's a funny one too. I think the Tigers will be more competitive next year. Now, people will say, well, you're insane. Why would you say that? But they have a very, very good spine. It's another year there where they've got Coruscant playing. I think Dewey's I'd be playing Dewey at 13. I think Dewey is a really, really good player. He could play a bit like a Isaiah Yeo, that big, tall, rangy 13 with a bit of ball skills. I like their halfback, Fainu. Luai's clearly an elite player. I think they got some really good athletes in that team. Taylor May, the centre, I think he needs an off season to get really fit again. The fullback Bull is special. Now, whether they can mould that into a team and become top 8, I don't know. Yeah. But I think they're going to be dangerous.
The raw assets are there to be a very good team. Can they bring it all together?
Yeah, but there's a lot more to it that goes into it than that. But you're right. I think Bennett will be devastated with how South finished up. They did have a shocking run of injuries with Mitchell and Murray. And Murray, he's the soul of the joint. South still have a very good top 13, but whether they can get them on the field and Bennett can sprinkle his magic dust over them is debatable. But yeah, there's a few teams that are very interesting. The Dolphins are my obvious one that I think will do even better next year and make the 8.
Yeah, and I think really when you were talking just then about injuries, and it makes you realise how critical not just the injuries themselves, but the timing of when the injuries happen also, because it can take the sails out of momentum that a team might have. And really that injury to Herbie Farnworth with the Dolphins was devastating.
Such a start. For a centre, he had so much influence on a game, which is crazy.
That was a straw that they'd had a number of injuries, but that was a straw that broke the camel's back.
Yep. Agreed.
Yeah. Well, when we played them at Combank Stadium,
it was a 12-point
difference between the teams.
12-point difference between the two teams. Crazy.
Yeah, he's special, and to lose him and Flagler and even Bostock and Max Plath, who's a terrific, he's a gutsy, gritty, Riley Smith type player. Daniel Saividi is a big body that they missed. So yeah, look, to do as well as they did, I think Christian Wolf deserves a lot of credit. He's obviously a very good coach.
Bernie, we're just going to finish off our rugby league chat with expansion. You and I caught up for coffee recently, and we chatted informally about the upcoming expansion. I was ultra focused on players and concerned about whether there'd be enough players to go around for 2 new NRL franchises in the coming years, as well as the new Super League franchises that will be coming in over in England. And given that, any new club that comes in probably needs access to 40 players when you're talking about training and opposed sessions and just that depth to cover injuries. But you opened my eyes to getting the staffing right.
Absolutely.
All that behind the scenes stuff. It's obviously a complex scenario, but can you give our listeners an insight about the key personnel that new franchises have to get right before a ball's even kicked in anger?
Absolutely. Yeah, look, it's before you can even think about buying a player, you're setting up an organisational structure for the club. And the key ones are the chairman, the CEO, the GM of football, the head coach, and the head of recruitment. Now, in addition to all that, you've got the commercial side of the business, the marketing people, the sponsorship people, the event people, the accountants, all those different pieces you have to set up there. set that aside and just focus on the football side, which is what most people are interested in. You have to have an alignment of the chair, the CEO, the GM of footy, the head coach, manager. The main four, even before the recruitment, they're the big four. Like, for example, at the Eels, you've got Matt Church as chair, Jim Sarantino as CEO, Mark O'Neill as GM of footy, and Jason Ryles. I know they're very well aligned, right? So you've got a group of people there that are aligned. They've developed a strategy and a plan of how they want to go about the football business. When you're starting a new club, you have to then go out and get these people. They're not easy to find. People with experience around building professional sports organisations, and particularly rugby league organisations, because you have to, if you haven't been involved in a rugby league organisation before, you don't know what you don't know. And the chair is very important. The three most important, quite frankly, are the CEO, the GM of footy, and the head coach, because they're the three from a football perspective. Because they're the three they're the effective decision makers. And underneath the GM of footy, you've got a slew of people: the high performance people, the well-being people, the assistant coaches. You've got a slew of people that report through to the GM of footy, and it's a very broad, wide-ranging job, because the GM of footy, he has to be numerically comfortable. He runs the salary cap. He has to be good at negotiation. He negotiates contracts. He has to be good at actually planning a roster and knowing his rugby league. He has to be able to work with the head coach. He has to be able to work with the recruitment manager. He has to be able to be understanding of the well-being of the players and what's required around that. He has to be able to work with the marketing and sponsorship people around organising football players to be part of that marketing and sponsorship and fan engagement piece. The skill set for a functioning, effective GM of footy is immense. The Eels have Mark O'Neill, and Mark's doing a good job. And you've got to have a head coach that buys into all that. So when I look at these new clubs, Perth and Papua New Guinea, before I even think about players, and players is a key issue, you've got to think about who are the people that are going to be fighting to get with players, and how are you setting up the organisation for success by putting the correct executives in the right spots. Perth have selected their chair, their CEO, their GM of footy, and they're done. Perth. I'm not going to comment on each of those individuals. That wouldn't be fair. Papua New Guinea, I know, are looking for a new CEO now that Andrew Hill's left, which is a big loss for them, because he was part of the bid team. He understood the lay of the land around that entire project. Have had some dramas behind the scenes with some governance issues with certain people involved with that bid. And of course, they've got to get a head coach. So these are the things. It's the organisational structure. You have to build your structure, go and find good people and put them in your structure, and then you give yourself an opportunity to go and execute, which means buying the right players and putting all the associated support staff in place. So, yeah, that's effectively how it works.
Yeah, and I guess, I mean, you talked about Parramatta's example, and say someone who's a chair doesn't necessarily have to have a background in rugby league. Like, you know, Matthew Beach is a strong Parramatta person, but his background isn't around a club or anything like that.
Yeah. But he's got a GM of footy and a head coach for that.
That's right. Yeah, but what I was going to say is a lot of the positions that you talked about, you know, it's going to be highly advantageous that you're going to have a background in rugby league in all of those roles. And
even the CEO role, it's not totally necessary if you've got a really strong GM of football, but there's no doubt in the world, if the CEO understands the industry of the company he's CEO of, it absolutely is a benefit.
Yes, and as you were running through all the list of personnel that have to be put on all the way through to, you know, welfare people and what have you, these people don't grow on trees in the rugby league industry.
No, they don't.
It is going to be a challenge, like that staffing aspect for the new franchises. I mean, even like I even noted overnight that Andrew Demetriou is Jason Demetriou is
The London Broncos.
Am I getting that right? It is Jason.
Jason, yes.
Jason, yeah.
Andrew was the CEO, AFL chair or
yeah.
CEO at one point.
So Jason is he's taken up the London Broncos coaching role, and he was being tipped as the target for PNG bid.
Right.
It that pool of people just diminished that even that little bit more.
Absolutely.
So real challenging times ahead, I think, for the new franchises.
Absolutely.
All right, Bernie, we're going to start to wrap up and let you get out of here. So before we do, we know that you're still based in the United States and you're here till the grand final on a trip. What's keeping you busy in America at the moment, mate?
Well, a family. I've got 3 grandchildren now. I've had I've got a little granddaughter who's 2, and I have 2 new grandsons that are literally about. So, and they live relatively close. So that's a great joy for my wife and I. I play a bit of golf with my sons, which is great. I try to stay a little healthy, not as diligent as I probably should be. I like to read, current affairs and stuff. I watch a lot of NRL games.
Yes.
Given that most of them run in the middle of the night, I'll often get up in the morning on a Friday morning or a Saturday morning and watch a couple of games over a cup of coffee. Zoom through a couple of games just to keep me up to date. I always make sure I watch the Parramatta games, of course. And I follow the US sports. I'm a Rams fan and a Dodger fan. And, I also like to keep up to date with the sports business world. There's a lot of good sports business articles and journalism in the United States of how professional sports organizations are run, how they're structured, their finances, their valuations. I enjoy all that stuff as well. So, no, I'm never bored.
That's good. So it turns out we're mortal enemies when it comes to NFL. I'm a Seattle Seahawks man myself, so NFC West rivals.
Bad luck.
But I do, even as a Mariners fan, you have to admire the incredible skill of Shohei Ohtani at the Dodgers, an all-time player.
I've seen him play live, and he's very special. And then some of the baseball experts over there, and I am not an expert, but I love the game. He may be the greatest baseball player that's ever lived, and that's from people that have been in the game, for decades. So you're watching someone very, very special.
He is building a portfolio that puts him right up there with the best of the best. So
absolutely
glad you're enjoying the sports over there, Bernie. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us and for our listeners and watchers. And we seriously appreciate it, mate. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure, boys. Stay well.
Thank you.
And look forward to catching up next time you're back in Australia.
Yes, sir.
Exactly.
Thanks, mate.
See you guys.
Yeah, Craig. I've seen him off there, but it's always a huge pleasure to have Bernie on the show. And I say pleasure; it's also a massive privilege, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're fortunate that first of all, Bernie is always happy to catch up when he comes back to Australia. But as we were chatting to Bernie just after we finished recording. And I said to him, always feel just that little bit more enlightened and educated about rugby league when we get to chat. And I say that not just about from our recorded chats, but when I get to catch up with Bernie, a man who's had a lifetime in rugby league and understands the business side of rugby league as much as the football side of it. And I'm always glad that he's there for our listeners as well, just to give them different perspectives, not just on Parramatta, but as the game as a whole. So really appreciate that. So huge thanks to Bernie for being part of this. John, thank you again for your flexibility with our recording times. And thank you to everyone that's had a listen or a watch of this. Of course, throw in our thanks as well to our sponsors, Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta, and of course the home of the Eels, Parramatta Leagues Club. Don't forget, tickets selling fast for Dennis Carnahan's show at Vikings. So make sure you get your tickets to that. And John, as I always say, go you mighty Eels.